Hello, my name is Kimberly Fuhrman, and I'm the Revit Community Manager at Autodesk. I would like to thank the BIM Coordinators Summit for allowing me to speak today, and I would love to share with you the top 10 things I wish I knew as a BIM manager. Here's a little bit about myself. I have been around the industry a long time. I've been with Autodesk almost 2 years now, but I always like to say, over a quarter of a century of experience in architectural civil design, project and BIM management. I also currently serve on the Augie Board of Directors. I'm a mom of three successfully grown to adulthood children, a dog mom, and soon to be grandmom Gigi, which is why I'm not with you in Ireland this year. My grandbaby is due very soon, and I can't wait for that to happen. So let's just get right into it. I've spent, like I said, quite a few years in BIM management, and there were these just top 10 things that I came up with that I wish I had known before I started. It was kind of, learning as I go, if you will. And so we're going to start the countdown from 10 to number one. And number 10 seems simple enough. BIM basics. What is BIM? Okay, so I like this definition. Of course, this is an Autodesk definition, but it's a holistic approach for creating and managing project data within an intelligent 3D model. But since the beginning of building information modeling, we've seen many different definitions. But I like this one because there's several different parts to this. There's the creating, there's the managing, project data, an intelligent 3D model. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. But I think this kind of simplifies really what building information modeling is. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with the graphic behind this, the BIM life cycle: plan, design, build, and operate. So, how did we get here? Um, from the BIM evolution. And, like I said, I've been around the industry a very long time, long enough that my first job out of tech school was hand drafting plans and details for an MEP engineer, and then kind of transitioning those into AutoCAD. So, I've seen the evolution of BIM, maybe not from the very beginning of it, but definitely from, popular adoption here in the US. A few years ago, this made me think back. A few years ago, I had a chance to tour the Biltmore Mansion, which is in North Carolina. This is my photograph. You can tell it's not a professional photograph. But while I was there, they had original blueprints from the construction of this structure. And, it really just fascinated me. I stood there looking at these blueprints for a very long time. And what really stuck out to me was the simplicity of the sections, of the details. They weren't very detailed, if you will, and, it made me think now what type of construction set would this building have in today's standards? Of course, you throw in building codes that didn't exist back then, and the technology, and it would just be a very, very complicated process. And so just, kind of a very simple timeline. I didn't want to get too detailed with this, and I know there's a lot more that has happened in the past 50, almost 60 years. And so I didn't want to get into a whole lot of detail, but technology really completely changed the way we build and design. Sometimes I think it complicated the way we build and design. So here we are, 2022, we're in this kind of BIM adoption explosion and looking forward to future digital solutions. Who knows what the next 25 years is going to hold? Number 8, what BIM managers really do. This is where it gets interesting, at least it did for me, in my career. What do BIM managers really do? And hopefully some of these look familiar to you, but this can be so varied from one firm to another, even one discipline to another. And since we've defined BIM, we know what BIM is, then we can really infer that a BIM manager is a person designated to manage the BIM process. It really should be that simple. But when I first started, I kind of morphed from a project manager to a CAD manager to Revit manager to BIM manager. And I was in this multidisciplinary firm. However, that BIM management position really didn't look much different than the CAD management position that I had before. It was really more of a technology management position, even though I was called a BIM manager. I was doing a lot with standards and templates and training. And yes, I was writing BIM execution plans, but that was really just a small part of my role. It wasn't really until I got into consulting that I understood and was able to practice BIM management on the construction side, you know, doing clash detection and coordination meetings and things like that. That was really, for me, a trial by fire. And so I hope that we can, maybe do better within our industries in defining those roles, specifically in BIM management and what BIM managers are really expected to do. Number 7, why do we need a BIM execution plan or standards? This sometimes seems like a little bit of extra work. Are they necessary? Absolutely. I mean, if we have trouble defining the role of a BIM manager, then the necessity of a BIM execution plan and standards really becomes obvious. These are tools that should be referred to often in the design and construction process. And if written properly, when questions come in, the BIM manager can then say, is this in the BIM execution plan? Have you checked the BIM execution plan? That being said, those BIM execution plans and standards shouldn't be overly complicated because in that case, people aren't going to read them. Concise source of clarity is central source of information. Keep it simple. You'll notice that theme throughout my presentation. Number 6, who should be on a BIM project team? Anybody? Everybody? How do we know? Well, again, my theme is keep it simple, limit the number of people involved to only those key stakeholders. You know, Obviously, this is going to look a little bit different from project to project, and I'm sure you could think of more project roles to include that I may have missed here. That's okay. Just remember that the more people that you have involved, the more you have to manage. And maybe there are different people that are involved in different phases of the project along the way. This is something, again, you'll have to determine at the beginning of your project. This is where I'm going to step on some toes, I think. It's more than just the I in BIM. We've heard it over and over. It's all about the I in BIM. I tend to respectfully disagree. I think it's about the entire BIM package. We have to keep in mind the end goal of BIM is to get a building out of the ground and into the hands of the owners. So, how does that manifest itself? What does that handoff look like? Is it still a set of paper documents? In my area, that's very common. We don't do a whole lot of electronic model handoff to municipalities or to owners. Um, could it be a model that is maintained and analyzed through facilities management? I think that's kind of where we're headed with BIM if we're not there already. Now we're looking at digital twins, and that kind of closes the loop with the digital model and information for operational and performance data. kind of goes back to, the level of detail, level of development. What's the end goal? What are your deliverables? I think all of these combined manifest in a total BIM package. Yes, the I is important, the information, the data is important, but it all ties directly into the model and the building. Number 4. Did I count right? I have to go back and check. BIM technology. Use only what you need. Now, of course, coming from a technology career now that I kind of transitioned to, there are so many tools out there that you can use. It's so easy to drown in that vast array of software programs. Use a few, my advice, use a few and use them well. Okay, obviously, I have my favorites and opinions and bias toward Autodesk. I have to. But whatever products you use, make sure you use it for its intended purpose. Don't expect a software program to do everything from start to finish. That's kind of the one of the big frustrations that I see in my current role. We want just one thing that we have to deal with, but that's really just part of, one tool in the toolbox. Is it possible to use one specific software from design to construction? Maybe. I guess you could. But why use a hammer when maybe a screwdriver would do? Whatever you're trying to accomplish, make sure you're using the right tool. Okay. Number 3, avoiding pitfalls. Yes, they are going to happen, but one of the objectives of BIM is to head off unnecessary field changes. Obviously, something's going to happen. I once had a rainwater collection tank start to float the day after installation. They hadn't backfilled yet, and it rained, and it actually rained enough that it lifted this um, 30,000 gallon tank or whatever it was, 10,000 gallon tank. It actually lifted it up out of the hole. So, stuff's going to happen. It's inevitable. But really, if the modeling and coordination process is done precisely and deliberately, there should be less instances of change orders and construction halts. It's kind of the purpose of spending so much time in the design model to get it as close to that perceived reality as we can get. And we can see where the clashes are and we can make changes in the model. It's easier to do it there, it's cheaper to do it there than out in the field. Obviously, communication is the key, allowing enough time in the budget for coordination review and, answering the question, what do we do if fill in the blank? Okay. Have a plan in place in order to handle those unexpected situations. They're going to come up. It's inevitable. The last 2 are kind of my lighthearted look at BIM management. Number 2, BIM manager is a lonely role. And so, as a BIM manager, I offer this advice. Don't think that you're an island, you're not out there by yourself, you're not finished learning. Always, continue to learn, keep up with technology because it is increasing at the speed of light. Expand your network, conferences like this, user groups, learn from others and help others who are also in your role. Continue to look at professional development, continuing education, and definitely observe industry trends and see, maybe you can stay ahead of the game and see where technology and the industry is headed. Okay. And my number one favorite thing I wish I knew as a BIM manager is that BIM is not for the faint of heart. So I wish I knew no one would listen to me as a BIM manager. This is not my quote. This is actually a quote from a BIM manager I talked to when I was preparing this session. And chose to protect him or her by making this an anonymous quote. But I once had a project where a technician, a BIM technician, used masking regions in details in a Revit project, and changes were made to the building structure. I think there was actually a wall that moved, and this information was not picked up in the details. This actually resulted in a 2-inch by whatever the length of the building was, shortage of concrete when it went out to the field. That was a nightmare. It was, stuff hit the fan and heads rolled. Uh, it could have been avoided with proper, vetting of the model. So make sure you have some QA, some quality assurance in place. Make sure you're redlining not just the drawings, but also checking the model, making sure the model has its integrity. Make sure your team is well trained in building construction and technology. And really, I look forward to your questions. Good luck to all of you, and may your BIM projects always run smoothly. We'll take your questions next. Thank you.